Good morning, everybody, and hope you're well this morning. Welcome to our Supercharging Your Desktop as a Service webinar. Hope everyone's well. My name is Tim Hall, CTO at boxxe, and we've got a packed agenda for this morning, so a short intro from me before we head over to our presenters. This morning are Gavin Connolly, Field CTO from Nerdio, and Simon Townsend, Field CTO for ControlUp. So a wealth of knowledge and two presenters who are very used to working together due to the way that the technologies seamlessly integrate. So we're looking forward to their presentation. So they're going to cover some slides, but also some hands-on demos. So stay tuned for that. If we can take next slide, please. The essence of today's session is around delivering a quality, usable desktop to the your end user community to enable them to work as productively and as effectively as possible. When discussing end user productivity, we like to talk in terms of personas. So who are the groups of users with similar requirements across your organization, and how can we deliver their desktop and their apps to them in the most appropriate way? This could be for a number of reasons, from physical working methods, regulatory requirements, security reasons, for seasonal or burst resource, or indeed for specific use cases. And underpinning all of this is Azure Virtual Desktop, a technology that hopefully a lot of you are aware of. This is, it's a very flexible solution delivered from the Azure cloud and supporting both Citrix and VMware for ease of integration. AVD is a specialism for boxxe, hence the reason why we're hosting this presentation today. But the whole point of this is around where Nerdio and ControlUp can accelerate and deliver on top of AVD and really supercharge that desktop as a service. So with that, I say short intro, but over to Simon and Gavin.
Thanks so much, Tim. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks everybody for joining this morning.
Yeah, thanks very much, Tim. Appreciate that. Let's see if we can move these slides on.
Looks good.
I'm guessing that a number of you on this call today are here, as Tim said, because you have got an interest in moving to some form of desktop as a service, or in fact, Microsoft Azure Virtual Desktop, the technology formerly known as WVD, that we now know as AVD. But there's probably a number of you who are on this call because you're looking forward at what your strategy going to look like when it comes to delivering a digital workspace. And you've probably got a handful of technologies in place. Maybe you're coming from a world where you've had on-prem VDI for the last couple of years since COVID. Maybe you're an organization who's used a technology like Citrix for the last 10, 15, 20 years, as an example. Or perhaps you're a fat client, a traditional laptop type of environment who's got Windows 10 at the moment, and you're looking down the barrel of October the 15th, 14th next year, when Windows 10 goes end of support, and you're perhaps considering, am I going to do a migration to Windows 11, or perhaps should I look at moving to something like desktop as a service and Azure Virtual Desktop? But regardless of where you are, or whether you've dabbled in AVD, whether you have already done some work on that, or whether it's still something that you're considering, most organizations have to go on, dare I say, a bit of a journey. And I don't mean to be too cliche when I say that, but you've got to get from your current state to your desired state, and to go through that on that journey, you tend to have to go through a number of different phases. And one of the things that myself and Gavin want to talk to you today about is how can ControlUp and Nerdio help with that journey to AVD, and how can we actually accelerate that move and give you a far better chance of making sure that that migration to the desired state is successful, continues to be secure, continues to be cost effective, and more importantly, continues to deliver a productive workspace, and dare I say, a great employee experience. Gavin, you got anything to say on that?
Yeah, look, that's so important, right? It is, we need to make sure that our virtualization desktop as a service solution is future-proofed with, the right technology, with the right TCO and the right user experience, as you said, Simon. And for many organizations, they're looking to Microsoft. many organizations already have that strong, close relationship with Microsoft. It helps now that the Azure Virtual Desktop solution is, broadening and maturing so well. In terms of the user experience, it's the RDP protocol is improving all the time. We're starting to see now, over 80% of, take the UK as an example, over 80% of organizations now have virtual desktop. Over 40% of those are running their desktop in the cloud. And as the Gartner Magic Quadrant for Desktop as a Service was released last September, as the first of its kind, it put Microsoft firmly top and to the right in that Magic Quadrant. So we're seeing now a huge shift in the market and out there for organizations towards Microsoft's virtualization solutions. And organizations, tend to then look for the solutions that are going to, give them the capabilities and the additional needs that check the boxes of those 3 points that we talked about already. And that's where Nerdio and ControlUp fits in and wraps around that solution to make sure that those 3 boxes, which are very important, are all ticked alongside Microsoft.
Yeah. And Gavin, this isn't something new anymore, is it? We've been doing this, particularly with boxxe, for a couple of years now, right? But there are still similar questions that come up when an organization is looking at moving towards something like AVD, right?
Exactly. The biggest challenge for a lot of organizations is time, it's resource, it's having the wherewithal to understand where they need to go and what they need to have in place to get where they need to go. And like you said, some of these questions seem to be consistent, understanding the environment, understanding the use cases, understanding user personas. A big one for people moving from the on-prem landscape into the cloud is knowing about your applications and what applications are compatible, and doing some sort of app migration, app realization, app assessment, and again, it's great partners like boxxe who can help you with all of that work. But yeah, so some of these questions are really key in understanding how we get there.
Yeah, and I think it is the big one that I come across on a regular basis is, okay, so what size machines am I going to need? The list from Microsoft of different options is extremely comprehensive, if not somewhat overwhelming. And the truth is there's a balancing act, which is, look, we're typically trying to do this because we want to become more cost effective, but we also don't want to move to something that is underperforming, underspec'd, and therefore fail when it comes to actually delivering an employee experience and productivity. I think one of the worst things that people can do, Gavin, is probably a lift and shift. And what I mean by that is literally just picking up whatever you've had for the last 2 years, 3 years, dare I say even 10 years in terms of specifications, saying, hey, I'm just going to lift those up. They're probably already virtual machines, and I'm going to dump them in Azure and let them run. That really is a completely inefficient way of doing things, and typically will end up having costs spiraling out of control, and really doesn't take into consideration what your current situation is and the current state is versus what perhaps that desired state would be. And we've had 1 or 2, Gavin, where they've tried to go down that route, and dare we say they've failed miserably.
They've had to come back. Yeah, that's it, and start again. Yeah, and look, the technology has moved on. That's what I think is clear for me over the past kind of 18, 24 months, is the technology is evolving as kind of virtualization and end user computing. So it's important that you get it right, because if you get it right, you can see performance gains, but you need to have the understanding and the knowledge and the information to ensure that you're doing things the right way, and working with organizations that have done this time again.
Yeah, agreed. So every migration typically has got a current state, has got the migration, has then got a desired state, or a pre-migration phase, the migration itself, and then business as usual, and what do you do post-migration to keep things optimized. We've really broken it down this morning or this afternoon into these three sections. And I'm pleased to say, regardless of whether you're looking at assessing your current estate, whether it's during the migration, actually moving people over to AVD, or whether it is post that migration, how you can continue to do optimizations in the environment and better manage that environment moving forward. Nerdio and ControlUp have got a part to play in each one of those phases. And I know that Tim may well come back and say some things on this later on in terms of about how they as an organization, as a trusted partner, would approach projects differently. But needless to say, from a technology point of view, both Nerdio and ControlUp can definitely help pre-migration, where you are today, during that migration phase, which you want it to be successful, but you also want it to try and move at pace. You don't want it to be a project that takes the next 2 to 3 years to do. And then more importantly, how do you continue to manage, monitor and optimize that environment? Gavin, anything to say on that? I mean, you get involved at the very, very start of many migration projects to AVD, correct?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, I would help and advise on multiple a week. I would say, on average, probably 1 or 2 a day. Yeah, so it's very important to get it right at the beginning, to understand what your strategy is going forward, and understand the success criteria of what you want to do going forward as well, and what you want to achieve and get out of it. Like I said, the other element of this is time for a lot of people. A lot of people have limited windows of time to make the changes before they're into renewal cycles and things like that, or before their data center contract runs out, or whatever the case might be, or as you pointed out earlier, that Windows 10 end of life. So yeah, it's getting out ahead, and it's working with your partners to understand that landscape, what that looks like, and what you need to do. I think 3 to 6 months for a lot of organizations, for a couple of hundred to a couple of thousand users, you can probably make this move successfully. I think if you're then looking at larger, you probably need to widen that out to kind of 6 months to 12 months. Again, it is a journey. So for some customers, that doesn't stop. It might broaden out to 18 months, 24 months, depending on what they're really looking to achieve. So yeah, time is of the essence, I suppose, is my message on that one. So
Time is money, as they say.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I must admit, I mean, look, as everyone knows on this webinar, right? I'm obviously with ControlUp. Gavin is with Nerdio, but time and time again, I work with Nerdio and customers who are utilizing that piece of technology, and definitely what Gavin says there from a timing point of view, it's quite astonishing how quickly today you can actually stand up an AVD environment and then scale it out using a technology like Nerdio. I've been around in this VDI space for far too long, and I can tell you back in the day, it took significantly longer to stand up a bunch of VDI machines and terminal servers, but we won't dwell on the past too much.
No, you're absolutely right, Simon. In one case we've done it in 8 days for somebody, which is really quick, from first conversation to actually having test users on there. So it can be done quickly. For a lot of customers, it's kind of 4 to 6 weeks. For those kind of 200, 500 kind of user base, we can kind of do it that quickly. Again, all depends on use case, applications, complexities, etc.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's dive into the meat. Let's take a look at each one of these 3 phases and just dive into how both ControlUp and Nerdio help. We are going to go through each part of this phase, and at the end of the phase, you're going to see a short demo. This really is just a teaser in terms of what both ControlUp and Nerdio can do. The whole purpose of this webinar is to give you that high-level information, and then if you're interested, obviously come back to boxxe, and both boxxe and ourselves can speak with yourselves on a more one-to-one basis, and we can talk around how we can get things like evaluations and POCs set up, and talk to you about some of the other capabilities that we may not have dived into as much detail on today. But I'm up first, and I'm going to talk to you about how ControlUp can help from a pre-migration point of view. And I think this is super important regardless of whether you've got physical laptops out there or whether you've got a Citrix estate, a VMware Horizon estate, perhaps another piece of DDI. Maybe you've just got some old remote desktop servers, old terminal servers kicking around.
There's a lot of them.
There is a lot of them. The key thing here is you really do need to understand and baseline what that current estate looks like. And there is a very, very simple way of doing that by deploying ControlUp onto that existing estate. And in short, what happens is that both agent and agentless technology are used to assess your estate and build out a picture of that estate and give you real-time visibility into that environment. So that's going to be monitoring everything from your Windows logon times, your CPU, your memory, the applications that are in use, the sessions that are in use, where people are connecting from, how their latency is, how many disk reads and writes are happening. And it's going to give you the ability to start to profile the user, the application, and the machine and the environment. And this is a super important step as you start to look at, okay, I've got a number of virtual desktops at the moment, or a number of terminal servers, or in fact, as I said, a number of physical devices. And you really need to understand and profile what does that environment look like so that you can then understand what you need to move to in AVD, what machines you need to go for, and potentially how much those machines are going to cost. And I'm going to come back to that in the demo. But this is all around, first and foremost, identifying and baselining the existing environment so that you can then correctly size, and then correctly cost what that move may well look like to deliver that. As part of this phase, though, it's also important to understand and identify any unknown issues that you may well have in that environment. You could well be having application crashes that you don't know about. You could have remote users that are on unmanaged devices, or users coming in from locations with poor Wi-Fi signal and networking connections. This assessment phase gives you the ability to very, very easily, and you're going to see it in a second in the demonstration, but the ability to take a 30,000-foot view and very, very quickly drill down and find the root cause of any issues that we may bring to your attention. And that's going to be important because you're going to want to make sure that you address those before you roll out the new environment as well. Because the worst thing would be is if, and I've seen it before, sadly, for an organization that didn't use a digital employee experience tool like ControlUp, but they decided to make a very rapid move to AVD, and they hadn't realized that some of the remote workers were on some very low bandwidth connections, and they were using things like Ethernet over power adapters that were causing problems. And they rolled out the new AVD infrastructure, and all of a sudden we ended up with a load of disconnects and timeouts, et cetera, et cetera. Identifying those issues up front is super, super important, as well as doing the baseline. But I'm going to come back to that in a second when I go through the demo. Gavin, over to you. How does Nerdio help?
Crucial, and knowledge is king here. And what Nerdio can do is it can help you model what your new environment is going to look like in that Azure Virtual Desktop. So you can plug in the information around your kind of machine sizes. Again, if you've used ControlUp, then you have a more kind of granular knowledge of that. You can bring that to the Nerdio modeler, plug that in, put in your work hours of your user base and information like that, to then get an accurate reflection of a model around kind of what those costs are going to be. And it will tell you both the unoptimized costs plus the cost then when you layer Nerdio over the top of that, because Nerdio, of course, can significantly reduce and lead to cost savings and cost optimizations. And if we move on to the next slide, Simon. So this tool and this model is inside of the Nerdio platform, but we've also made a freemium version of that available on our website. So I've included the QR code in case anybody wants to have a play after the webinar, but you can plug in some of your details and spit out rough estimates of what that will cost. It also now includes your sustainability metrics as well. Lots of organizations now in the UK are targeted and have KPIs on, reducing their carbon emissions. So it will show you things around kind of carbon savings of that move to the cloud, or of the kind of consumption and power savings that Nerdio can drive with its auto scaling. So again, very important to model and to understand what those costs will look like and may look like as you go through this kind of pre-migration phase, understand what that looks like and help you build your business case, and ensure that the TCO is going to be right for you.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, we're both talking about sizing, costing and optimization at this phase. And so it's probably just worth, Gavin, you'll laugh when I do this, right? I'm going to use one of my terrible analogies. I apologize,
Sure,
but
sure.
Let's use a car analogy because everyone loves car analogies. If you've got a current car today, ControlUp is actually going to be measuring the performance of that current car. It's going to be looking at what your miles per gallon is. It's going to be looking at how you drive, whether there's any issues with that car. And it's going to give you a rough idea that if you need a car that does, 40 mpg and needs to have a range of 500, for instance, it's going to connect to Azure, and it's going to give you some recommendations of what you may need to move to. With that information, we can then give that information to Nerdio. And what Nerdio can then say is, okay, based on the new car specification, I can further optimize that environment, further optimize that cost by utilizing the Nerdio technology. So once you've got the new car in place, this modeler is then going to say, okay, well, this modeler is going to say, if you were to go with that new car, I can further extend your range, further increase your MPG with the benefits that we get from Nerdio. So these two things go really, really nicely in hand. And I hope I haven't confused matters with that that analogy. But
I think it was one of your better analogies, Simon, to be fair.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate that. So could you guys see my wallpaper, my web browser now?
Yes.
Excellent. Good. So I'm just going to, before I hand back to Gavin, I'm just going to dive into the ControlUp console here for a second. And specifically, I'm looking at our current VDI desktop as a service estate. ControlUp, for your information, is a single platform. We call it a DEX platform, digital employee experience platform. It's got the ability to measure all aspects of the user's workspace, looking at physical desktops, unified communications, Teams and Zoom calls monitoring. We can do user sentiment and gathering by taking surveys, for instance. We've even got synthetic testing in there, and also endpoint security, so looking at patches and vulnerability assessment. But in this particular case, we're really focusing on our VDI estate. And what you've got in front of you now is a number of dashboards and also a real-time console that is giving you access into your environment, visibility into your environment in real time. And when I say real time, that's every 3 seconds. Every single 3 seconds, the data is being collected and it's being uploaded live in these real-time dashboards. So across my estate at the moment, I can see I've got 173 virtual desktop machines. Some of those are going to be on Citrix, some of those on Horizon, some of those on AVD. They're running on 10 hosts. I've got things like my average logon duration. I can see what's consuming CPU and memory in my environment, and I can at any point drill down into these. But I'm using this to identify what areas I may have potential issues with. So I want to go and take a look at, for instance, where I've got stress levels in my environment. As I look at the details section, you can see that I've got a complete overview and a picture at the top here of my environment. I can look at my Azure subscription and how much I'm spending, look at my resource groups, look at my hosts as an example, look at the 112 machines that are running in my environment and all the user sessions and the processes. I can even go out to my Citrix NetScalers and load balancers and monitor those as well. But ControlUp is immediately prioritizing these machines based on stress level. So you can see here that I've actually got a Citrix environment that is currently critical, and it's basically highlighting to me that I've actually got a potential memory utilization issue and a disk queue issue on that environment. And you can see as I scroll from left to right, I'm actually pulling up a number of different counters in real time, giving me an idea of what could be the issue. I'm actually experiencing on this particular environment is actually reporting some significantly higher than normal log-on durations, and is also telling me that this machine is actually running out of memory. If I want to dive a little bit deeper, I can go down into the user session themselves. I can see that Steve-O here is having a problem. It's got nothing to do with memory in this particular example, or CPU, but it's to do with his I/O. And likewise, if I was to go and take a look at a slightly different dashboard on here, what I've got the ability to do is start to prioritize things based on the connecting device. So here I can go and take another user, Paul B as an example. He happens to have a good experience at the moment, but I'm going to show you here because you can see here how I've also got visibility, not just over the virtual desktop that I'm connecting to, in this case, a Windows desktop, but I can also have visibility of the endpoint. I can see how that endpoint is connected, what resources it's using, has it got a good Wi-Fi strength, does the issue actually appear at the client side or on at the ISP level or on the Citrix server itself. You can see just as we've been talking here, I've actually had a device that's already come up and said that it's got an average score. And if I go into that average score, you can see that for someone here, my Wi-Fi signal has dropped below an 80% threshold, which means it's now turned orange. And maybe that is something that we need to go and take a look at. In fact, I've got a 191 millisecond connection between this endpoint, this user, and their Citrix server. And that could be because of a slow network and bandwidth limitations, or what could well have been because he's connecting to the wrong box. But you can see here the level of detail that you can get into, but also at a high level, how you can start to identify some of those potential challenges you might have. What becomes really interesting is what we spoke about, is when we come into our VDI reporting and we start to take a look at the environment assessment. And this assessment, you know, if you've installed ControlUp in a very, very short space of time, you're immediately going to be able to do an environment assessment. It's going to be able to summarize all of that information for you. How many branches you've got, how many sites you've got, what servers are. But more importantly, if I come down into my sizing recommendations, it's going to start to actually look at my machines that I've got in my environment and start to recommend things to me based on real-time usage. If we go and take a look at this Windows machine as an example, you can see here that I'm starting to monitor CPU and memory usage, and it's now coming up with recommendations for me based on that real-time usage. And so I can very easily, across my estate, start to look at, do I need to be adding more memory, adding more CPU? And more importantly, if I connect that to Azure, based on my own subscription of Azure, or in fact your subscription of Azure, I can use that then to actually make recommendations. So I can see that this Windows 10 machine, actually what we're recommending in Azure is a standard F4S machine. And that's typically going to cost you, based on your spot pricing, your subscription pricing, around $165 a month. Even when we get to those machines that are running in Azure, we're still looking at what is our utilization today versus what we might be recommending. But you know, when you get to that point, that optimization is really where Nerdio is going to kick in and start to give you the benefit. But first and foremost here, assessing your existing environment and understanding what machines you've got out there, how they're being used, how much CPU and how much memory you may well need moving forward, and what that's going to cost by linking into your Azure subscription. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to Gavin. Gavin, you got anything to say on anything I've said there?
Yeah, just look, it's as everybody can see, right? Super comprehensive tool, right? And yeah, it's like mission control, right? It's everything at your fingertips, and in terms of both your physical endpoints as well as your virtual desktops, and you know, around kind of assessing and analyzing what that existing environment looks like and how it can then come across to AVD. You know, from there then, I suppose, and just checking that everybody can see my slides now. Is that coming through, Simon?
Should be. Let's have a...
Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah,
I can
looks good. Yeah,
see
super.
yours. Yep.
Perfect. So the next part is around the migration, okay? And you know, the important thing is that speed to deployment that we have here, and that's where Nerdio comes in and really can accelerate that deployment. We can do that 160% faster than doing that natively with Azure Virtual Desktop on its own. Nerdio is that easy button. It's that wraparound management layer for your Azure Virtual Desktop environment, and we can help accelerate that in a number of different ways around our kind of built-in scripting, our automation tools, our image management, and our application management is how we can do that. And I'm going to show you today how quick and easy it is to build out your images and your host pools, your virtual desktops. We can start off building a desktop image, and I'll show you what that looks like in the demo environment, but we can layer in the different components there. So that's what we do. If we think of the different things that we need to run a virtual desktop as our building blocks or our Lego blocks, we can plug in all of those into Nerdio. So Nerdio is a platform as a service tool. It's deployed into your Azure tenant and subscription. It then uses Graph APIs to manage all the different components that you need. So what we do is we plug in the different components, your tenant, your subscription, your identity, the subnets, and then the virtual networks, the resource group, your Azure storage for your profiles. We then take built-in scripts and scripts that you can bring yourself and write yourself in the platform, applications from all sorts of different repositories, and then we use all of that to build up your images and capture your images in a very easy way. And then we use things like tag groups or tag templates, RDP policy templates, auto scaling templates, and we bring all of those components to then build out our workspaces, our host pools, our app groups, and our hosts, our virtual machines, as well as your policies and profiles. So all the things that you need to make up your Lego virtual desktop, if you will. And one core thing that we do to really help and accelerate this is around what we call the Nerdio Unified Application Manager. So that is the ability to plug into different application repositories that you may have. That includes the Microsoft public Winget repository. That's the Microsoft Store. You can also have your own private Winget repository as well for your own bespoke apps. We can plug into SCCM if you utilize that for your app delivery. We can even plug into Intune for Intune application delivery, as well as supporting App Attach and this new concept of shell apps, which is for more complex PowerShell installation scripting. When we have all of those plugged into Nerdio, it then becomes very easy to deploy and update those applications onto your master image, your Intune managed Windows physical endpoints, your AVD virtual machines, and even your Windows 365 Cloud PC. So this is a core component that makes it simple to build out those images and build out those host pools and keep those applications and that app lifecycle up to date. Simon, over to you briefly, and then we'll jump into a Nerdio demo.
I think I mentioned it earlier, right? One of the key things that you need to be able to do during the actual migration is to continue monitoring how that migration is doing. So as you're rolling out these new desktops that have been built with Nerdio, you want to make sure that log-on times and performance is as it should be. You continue to use the console for that, but also to push surveys out. And this is something that's relatively new to a lot of organizations, but gathering employee sentiment from within the desktop, the workspace that they're using, by pushing a survey out and saying, hey, how did your migration go? Is there any immediate feedback that you've got? Giving people to do that in an interactive way, which doesn't require them logging a support ticket, actually is very, very useful. And so using inbuilt surveys within the ControlUp platform is a good way of actually achieving and gathering feedback on the migration as you go.
Absolutely, and as you know, as Nerdio can do with lots of different elements in terms of automating things like adding your AVD agent, adding your FS Logics app, we also add in your ControlUp agent as well as part of that build. Again, just another Lego block that we can add in there to help you build that desktop. So let's take a look at that, and let's look at what that looks like. So this is your Nerdio Manager for Enterprise application here, your web application that your admin team are accessing. So again, this is the alternative user interface for your admin team to the Azure portal that gives them more comprehensive features, as well as adding in things like cost savings, capacity resiliency, and lots of other features. So within the settings here, we've plugged in things like that I mentioned: our tenant, our subscriptions, our resource groups, etc., our application repositories here, as well as our identity, our storage, and like I said, we can even plug in our ControlUp agents as well and hook into that. And then we have our applications here. So this is our unified application manager tool, where we can push out the applications from our different repositories here, whether it be the public Winget repository, a private repository here. We even have our Intune apps in this repository here. And utilizing them, we can build out our desktop images. So I'll add from Azure Library here. I'll call this one Gav boxxe. We'll select our virtual network. We'll select our Azure image. That can be an image that I've created earlier. It can be a marketplace image. It can be a custom image. It can be something sitting in my compute gallery. It can be an older version of one of those managed images. For now, we'll just stick with a Windows 11 multi-session. This one, we're just creating a temp host VM. So the sizing, it's just for me to log on to customize my image. So the size is okay. I can add in a resource group here. I can set my security type. We support standard as well as trusted launch and confidential VMs. I have the option to join to AD, but we won't for this demo. I can set my time zone to Dublin time. And then down here, I can add in my local user creds. I can add this to the compute gallery. I can run my scripts. So from my script library, over 60 scripts built in, things like installing Microsoft 365 can come in here. Things like optimizing Microsoft Edge for AVD can come in here, etc. So I can run multiple scripts in there. I can also install some of those applications from that those different app repositories directly onto this golden image. So I can put in Google Chrome. I can put in Microsoft Teams here. Microsoft, if I can type right, Teams and Notepad++. Once I'm happy with that, I have the option to apply tags. I hit OK, and that will go, and that will start to spin up that VM. That's going to take about 10 or 15 minutes here. You can see that I get to see all the details, so it tracks everything that's going on here, who is actually doing the task. And if we look down here, one that I created earlier, you can see we're showing exactly what we're doing under the hood with the APIs, and if there's any issues, we're pulling logs, etc. So it's very comprehensive to see exactly where that build is and where it's coming from. Once I'm happy with that, and if you've never done AVD natively, AVD can be quite a it's a fantastic platform, but to create those images, it can be quite a long, time-consuming task. We turn that into settings by clicking here on the set as image process. So when that process completes in about 10 minutes, I will have this image. I can log on to that, make any sort of further customizations that I need to do. When I'm happy, log off, come back here, and I can go ahead, I can run more scripts at this point, or even install more applications at this point. But ultimately, I come down here and I run now to set as image. That's going to do all your sys prep, your generalize, removing profiles, etc., installing agents and so on, and having that image ready to deploy your host pools. So I've already pre-created a workspace. Within the workspace, then we can go and we can add a dynamic host pool. So we can give that a test name. We can say if that's multi-user or single user. We can give it a directory, give it an FS Logics profile storage, give it a name. and then come down here and specify the different details that I need. Once I'm happy with those details, we go next to our auto scaling, where we have the best in class, best in the industry auto scaling, the most granular auto scaling, where we can scale based on things like multiple triggers, multiple schedules. It's really, really comprehensive, and that's where we can go and give you the savings, the cost savings over and above can do natively in AVD and even with other solutions out there. Most customers, Nerdio will pay for itself with its the cost of the licensing with its optimizations, and for the vast majority of customers, it does much more than that. It saves much more than the licensing costs. So look, just conscious of time there, we will jump back to the slides briefly. Post migration, we have that per user cost breakdown to show you the cost analysis and the per user breakdown of the cost, which is very challenging to do natively in the tool set. We also have that automation scheduled task life cycles of things like OS updates and patching, application management and life cycles, as well as things like managing profiles and managing the disks. We also very cleverly can swap the disks when the machines are turned off to save on more costs, as well as having things like right sizing tools to give you that information on how you can change your machines. We also have a capacity extender to mitigate from Azure data centers running out of capacity, and we even have auto healing as well. So with the time, I'll stop there and kind of just say, if you want to know more about why the majority of organizations that are looking at AVD are doing so with Nerdio, just come and have a chat with us. Simon, over to you to kind of finish up on the ControlUp piece.
Yeah, no problem at all. Sorry, I wasn't ready for you to hand back to me. That's my bad. Hang on a second. I've lost.
I think, to be honest, we're just coming up to time.
We are. So I think we've still got you can still see a screen in front of me, can't you? Which is rather strange. Okay. I'm not sure what we're looking at now. I apologize.
I think that's my screen on the slides.
We're still looking at yours.
Yeah.
I think hopefully what you've seen today is that there is huge value in at least considering either ControlUp and or Nerdio together to help accelerate a move to Azure Virtual Desktop. I think helping with that migration and accelerating the assessment phase and the migration phase is obviously super, super important. But I do want to stress the fact that I think it's the ongoing management post-migration where both these solutions really come into their own.
Yeah.
Being able to proactively monitor employee experience across AVD is something that people have been doing for a long time with the likes of Citrix and VMware Horizon environments. And more importantly, then from a Nerdio point of view, constantly looking at new ways in which those optimizations can be done. Gavin, I was going to ask you a quick question. I know
Sure.
We're short up. Just quickly, what are the top 3 ways that your solution optimizes an AVD environment and saves money?
Yeah, great question. So around the cost optimization, Simon, it's we help to swap out the disks. So you still pay for the disks even when the disks are powered off. So we swap out the disks when the machines are powered off to the cheapest type of disk. Huge cost savings to be had there. We also have the most granular kind of scaling capability. So we genuinely can start those machines when they're needed. More importantly, turn them off whenever they're not in use, more so than what you can do with any other tool out there. So again, big bump on there. We also have things around savings on the profile and the storage, etc., etc. So yeah, really, lots of very worthwhile having the conversation with us, and yeah. we can show the data, to back that up and show some examples of where our organizations are saving that cost. What about you, Simon? Just to kind of wrap up, what would you say are the 3 advantages of monitoring your AVD environment kind of in post-migration from a ControlUp perspective.
So I'm hoping everybody from the demo has at least seen the depth and the breadth of what we can monitor in terms of data collection and how we pull all of that information together and present it. The piece that amazes me the most, and I suppose is the number one benefit that people get out of it, comes down to the remediation. That console that I showed you earlier is not just used when an issue occurs to identify an issue. It's used day in, day out by first, second, third line support people to actually remediate issues as they come. And we've got some really good integration with service management tools, integration like yourselves with Intune. And I think this is around how do we actually start to automate IT processes? So, hey, my FS Logics profile is blown up or my Teams is crashing. I want to be able to remediate that from within the same console. And I also then want to put a trigger, an alert, an automation in place that if that happens to anybody else moving forward, I can automate the remediation. And that I think is probably the number one thing I would talk about.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we did kind of talk about that. We wanted to maybe do a part 2 with boxxe in future all around the endpoint management, but obviously we've run out of time and it's kind of, it's a good tease for maybe we have a second session. From my part, thanks so much everybody for tuning in. Simon, thanks for the great conversation. Tim, thanks for hosting. Tim, maybe we'll hand back to you just for kind of wrap up and questions and next steps.
Great, thank you both. And if we could just put that slide back up again, that would be great. I think just again, my thanks to you both for this morning's session. Great insight. I think what's clear is there's so much depth to both products that trying to do it justice in 45 minutes is a challenge, and we could run on and talk for a long time. I think my anecdote would be back in the day when it's kind of I had slightly less grey hair and I was on the service desk. If I had a tool like ControlUp Nerdio to manage the environments I was looking after, life would have been a lot simpler. But it's where we can make a difference right now. I think just to kind of wrap up from a boxxe point of view, our input into this is obviously we've got the lifecycle wrap around both ControlUp and Nerdio, or whether that's just simply advice to your internal teams about the best fit solutions through assessment, deployment, and management to bring this to life and really empower your organizations. Obviously, of course, we'll follow up with all of you after this webinar, see what you thought, any feedback, and also where we can potentially advance the conversation. As Simon and Gavin said, we'll look to put on a follow-up session as a part 2 to really get into some further detail. I think we're going to put our email addresses on the screen, so we're going to follow up anyway individually. But certainly, thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you very much for the content, chaps, and hope everyone has a great rest of the day. And speak to you all soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Tim.
Yes. Thanks so much. Cheers. Appreciate it. Take care.